Welcome back, High Floor Heroes. This is Chad, and this is the High Floor Fantasy Show. Like, comment, subscribe, click on that notification icon. Please do me a favor and don't smash anything. I abhor violence, so please just click on it. When you're done here, head on over and support the channel on Patreon. I've made it very affordable. You get more audio, more video, and you get PDF files of all the floor rating stuff that you can print out. It's very colorful, color-coded stuff, and you can use it, look at your start sits for the week coming up, that kind of a thing. Really appreciate that support. I've decided to streamline this a little bit, and I'm going to be giving you the top 10 quarterbacks and running backs in the same episode, and I'm only going to be giving you the stuff that you can get from me. I realize it doesn't make sense for me to read off a stat line from some other website that you can get. You just go to the big networks or whatever if you want to see how many passes they threw or whatever. That's not really what I'm here to do. I'm here to do floor rating and give you some information about their consistency, standard deviation type stuff, mainly the floor rating. So that's what I'm going to focus on. Excuse me. We're going to go ahead and get started with quarterbacks this week. Coming in at number 1, unseating our reigning champ, Kyler Murray, is Tom Brady with a floor rating of 100. Tom Brady, remember the highest score every week is 100, and it is cumulative. Tom Brady has the highest average points per game. He has the highest total. His average is just over 33. His total is not quite 100. He also has the highest floor year to date of almost 33 fantasy points. He hit his, let's see, I got to move my little bar here. He hit his floor in week 1, and he hit his ceiling in week 2. He is very, very consistent. His standard deviation is only 0.25. He also has the highest 3-week average of any quarterback, again, at just over 33 fantasy points. So Tom Brady coming in number one with floor rating of 100. Okay, Kyler Murray bumps down to number 2 with a floor rating of 88.4. Kyler hit his floor in week 3, not quite 23 fantasy points. He hit his ceiling in week 2 with almost 40. Unfortunately, he is not very consistent. His standard deviation is above average, 9.03. Matter of fact, it's in the lowest, or what we could say the highest 25%, which is not where you want to be. His 3-week average is just over 33 fantasy points. These guys are really grouped tightly together with some of their averages, but as you can see, Murray much less consistent than Brady. Kyler Murray, floor rating of 88.4. Patrick Mahomes coming in with a floor rating of 88.35. Mahomes hit his floor in week 3, 27.5. He didn't have so good of a game. He hit his ceiling in week 1 of not quite 37 fantasy points. He is below average in standard deviation at 5.03, and his 3-week average is not quite 31 points. I can't tell you the exact numbers on the fantasy points, and you can look up that data anyway. I can't repackage another website's fantasy point information exactly, or they'll send you a cease and desist because it's a violation of their terms of service. I can't broadcast their numbers as my own. I have to get numbers from somewhere, but I can't tell you exactly the numbers because of what I just mentioned. But anyway, Mahomes coming in, floor rating 88.35 at number 3. Derrick Carr coming in at number 4, floor rating of 82.52. Derrick Carr hit his floor in week 3 with over 26 fantasy points. He hit his ceiling in week 1 with just under 30. He is also very consistent, below average in standard deviation at 1.3, and his 3-week average is not quite 28 fantasy points. Derrick Carr, number 4, floor rating of 82.52. Number 5, Kirk Cousins, my boy, floor rating of 80.45. Cousins hit his floor in week 1, not quite 26 fantasy points. He hit his ceiling in week 3, Still winning the number 2. No, he's number 3, or week 3. Hit his ceiling with just over 28 fantasy points. Below average in standard deviation, which is a good thing, 1.47. He's very consistent. And his 3-week average is just over 27 fantasy points. Kirk Cousins at number 5, floor rating of 80.45. Number 6, Jalen Hurts. Now, he had a bad week. that was painful to watch. I don't have him in any leagues because I'm not into the super young players. But I did have Miles Sanders in one league, and I needed to win. I needed him to score more than 8.05 points to win and avoid the tie. In that league, in that scoring format, he scored 8.5. And I won by 0.45 points. I know that guy, the other guy on Monday night he was just, it hurt his feelings probably. But anyway, number 6, Jalen Hurts. Number 6, floor rating of 77.25. Hurts hit his floor in week 2 with not quite 24 fantasy points. He hit his ceiling in week 1 with just over 31 fantasy points. He is very consistent as well in the bottom 25% of standard deviation, lowest quarter there. And his 3-week average is just under 27 fantasy points. Number 6, Jalen Hurts, floor rating of 77.25. Number 7, here's another one of my guys, Matthew Stafford of LA, floor rating of 75.38. He hit his floor in week 2 with over 20 fantasy points. And he hit his ceiling in week 3 with just over 33. Now, he is not quite as consistent as we would like to see. He's in the upper 50% of standard deviation. Again, higher is worse. Lower is better. Upper 50% with a standard deviation of 6.1. And his 3-week average is just over 27 fantasy points. I don't include the 3-week average in the floor rating calculation, which is the most important number, I'm telling you. But what I do is you can look at the 3-week average compared to the year-to-date average, and if it's higher than the year-to-date, that means the player has trended up in the last 3 weeks. And that's just an interesting thing to look at when you're considering whether to start or sit, and you want to look at the matchups too. Excuse me. I would never recommend that you use my information about the floor rating as the only consideration when you're making your decisions. But it's another tool in your toolbox. I always consider matchups, but if I have 2 players, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, whatever, if they are similar in floor rating and one has the better matchup, of course I'm going to start the one with the better matchup. If I have a player who is shoot the lights out floor rating in a tough matchup and a player who is way inferior in terms of floor rating, even in an easier matchup, I'm likely to start the guy with the higher floor rating because I can say that he's demonstrated more consistency, high scoring ability, and reliability. If you think about all the things that I use to calculate the floor rating, it's just another tool. Consider other things and get other opinions. But this is what I've got for you. Going to move on here. Number 8, Lamar Jackson. Floor rating of 74.98. Lamar hit his floor in week 1. Again, I'm using the actual floor. I'm not using a projected floor or a possible floor. But Lamar hit his floor in week 1 with just over 22 fantasy points. He hit his ceiling in week 2 with not quite 37 points. Now, he's also not so consistent. Above average standard deviation of 8.04. And his 3-week average is just over 27 fantasy points as well. Very close to Stafford's. But consistency is a bit of an issue for him, apparently. Lamar Jackson, number 8, floor rating of 74.98. Now, here's one that I don't think anybody saw coming in the top 10. How about Sam Darnold? I have him on a team with Tannehill as another quarterback, and I think Cousins. I waited, and I got some of these late round guys. Now, If you go back last week, Sam Darnold was slightly below Tannehill in the floor rating, but I looked at the matchups and I said, you know what? Darnold's the one to start. It turned out that Tannehill finished the week with slightly more fantasy points than Darnold, but I'm still very happy with Darnold's performance, and he is moving up the ranks here. Number 9, Sam Darnold with a floor rating of 71.92. He hit his floor in week 2 with not quite 23 fantasy points. He hit his ceiling in week 3 with just over 28. He's on the good side of standard deviation. He's in the bottom 25%, 3.09, and his 3-week average is 24.73. I'm telling you, keep your eye on Darnold going forward. He's been very consistent. He's broken into the top 10, and just keep your eye on those matchups. Okay, number 10, finishing out the quarterbacks here. This is a name everyone expects to see in the top 10. It's Josh Allen of Buffalo, coming in at number 10 with a floor rating of 70.06. He hit his floor in week 2, just over 19 fantasy points. Now, his whopping ceiling he hit in week 3, over 40 fantasy points. That's a heck of a week. But what that does to you is that puts you in the top 25% of standard deviation, which is a bad thing. He's got almost 12 points. It's 11.93. He is the highest standard deviation out of the top 10. Again, floor rating of 70.06, and his average points per game is just over 27. Okay, going to move on now to the top 10 running backs. Running back number 1 for week 3. Here's a name, again, that we like to see in the top 10. Number 1, Derrick Henry, floor rating of 100. Now, we've got a story to tell about Henry. Week 2, he had almost 48 fantasy points. So he hit his ceiling in week 2 for sure. He hit his floor in week 1 with not even 11 points. So he has the highest average and the highest total. He also has the highest 3-week average year to date. But unfortunately, he has the highest standard deviation at 19.35. He's been very inconsistent. The reason he's at number 1 is because even if you had him and dealt with the inconsistency, his 47 point something points in week 2, still carries you. We don't like to see that kind of inconsistency, but his floor is quite high and his ceiling is through the roof. That's why he's at number 1, Derrick Henry, floor rating of 100. Number 2, DeAndre Swift from Detroit. I wasn't high on Detroit, still not, other than Hawkinson. Comes in with a floor rating of 88.96. He hit his floor in week 2 with over 11 fantasy points. He hit his ceiling in week 1 with over 24. He is also in the top 50% of standard deviation, bad thing, 7.08. And his 3-week average is just under 20 fantasy points. Number 2, DeAndre Swift, floor rating of 88.96. Number 3, happy here, Austin Eckler, Los Angeles, floor rating of 85.47. His floor he hit in week 1 with not quite 12 fantasy points. His ceiling he hit in week 3 with over 22. Above average in standard deviation, 6.29. And his 3-week average is not quite 20. Number 3, running back, Austin Eckler, floor rating of 85.47. Number 4, Chris Carson, Seattle, floor rating of 76.19. His floor he hit in week 1, under 14 fantasy points. His ceiling he hit in week 3 with over 16. He's in a good spot with standard deviation, 1.25. That's top 25, or that's bottom 25%. You got to think backwards in standard deviation. It's the lowest 25%. Standard deviation 1.25. 3-week average is really good. It's the same as a season-long average, but it's a whole number, so I really can't say it. Let's just say it's above 14 and below 18. You got to pick. Chris Carson, floor rating of 76.19, coming in at number 4. Number 5, Christian McCaffrey. Here we go again, with the injuries. I hope you got Chuba Hubbard. He's coming in with a floor rating of 75.83. Now, remember, this is after 3 weeks, right? So he's still on the board, and he will probably continue to be. He might not be in the top 10 next week. He'll fall off as he's missing games, right? The number of games played is a big factor in the floor rating. As a matter of fact, it's one of the highest weighted components to the formula. So, yes, he's still in the top 10 after week 3, coming in at number 5 with a floor rating of 75.83, but it's unlikely that he's going to be there for long as the number of games played fall off. He did play. He has played in 3 games, right? But he just didn't play very much in the most recent one. Obviously, his floor is in week 3. He hit his ceiling in week 1 with not quite 28 fantasy points. And that puts him high up in the standard deviation, meaning he's inconsistent. Unfortunately, it's an injury. You can't do anything about that. His 3-week average is almost 20 points, but you're going to see that start to go down now because next week he's going to get he won't get a 0 for his points next week. It'll just be there'll be no stat line. And this is important. It's something I do. I go to one of the big providers, and what I have to do is I have to determine if a player has a goose egg for a week. If one of the big providers that I use, if they have no stat line, I don't enter a 0. If the guy has no targets, no attempts, no nothing, that's not the same to me. That's just like a dash in the spreadsheet. That's or an X or something, a non-zero value. If the guy goes out and gets targeted 3 times and drops all 3 passes, that's a goose egg. No, because he does have a stat line. He was in the game, received targets, but didn't catch anything. A stat line with no score is a goose egg. No stat line is not a goose egg. It just means there's no data for him for that game. That's the way I calculate this. Okay, where was I? I hope I'm Christian McCaffrey, number 5, floor rating of 75.83, but he gone. Bye-bye. Number 6, Aaron Jones. That was quite the ending. Number 6, Aaron Jones, coming in with a floor rating of 73.31. His floor happened in week 1. Wow, just over 4 fantasy points. His ceiling happened in week 2, over 40 fantasy points, which is a great thing, but that gives him a very high standard deviation, 18.89. Very inconsistent. But that's another case like Henry. Man, when your ceiling is over 40, you can deal with a down week, and you're still going to end up in the top 10. So that is Aaron Jones, running back number 6 with a floor rating of 73.31. Number 7, Chase Edmonds, Arizona. I'm still not sure about that whole offense. I mean, they're firing on all cylinders. They've got Murray's in the top 10. Chase Edmonds is in the top 10. He comes in floor rating of 70.23. He hit his floor in week 2 with over 12 fantasy points. And he hit his ceiling in week 1 with over 14. That makes him very, very consistent. 1.18 standard deviation. Chase Edmonds, number 7, with a floor rating of 70.23. Number 8, Cordero Patterson. Floor rating of 69.58. His floor happened in week 1, over 8 fantasy points. His ceiling happened in week 2 with over 23 fantasy points. That does make him slightly inconsistent with a standard deviation of 7.6. His 3-week average, I think I may have missed all 3-week averages in the last couple of players, is over 16 points. Cordero Patterson, number 8, floor rating of 69.58. Number 9, Najee Harris, Pittsburgh. Here's another offense to keep an eye on. I think Ben is definitely in his twilight now. But who are they going to back him up with? Rudolph? Rudolph gets hit in the head with his helmet. He's practically concussed. Najee Harris, floor rating of 69.01. He hit his floor in week 1, under 6 points. He hit his ceiling in week 3, over 28 fantasy points. That does put him high in standard deviation. Top 25% bad thing of 11.21 standard deviation. Najee Harris, floor rating of 69.01, coming in at number 9. Number 10, okay, now this is for the, well, no, this is just fine. Nick Chubb in Cleveland, coming in with a floor rating of 68.81. He hit his floor in week 3, under 9 fantasy points. He hit his ceiling in week 1, over 23 fantasy points. Above average standard deviation, 7.37. 3-week average of north of 16 points. Chubb coming in number 10, running back after week 3, floor rating of 68.81. You got to watch out for Kareem Hunt, who actually, I'll give you the bonuses. Yeah, Kareem Hunt comes in at number 11, floor rating of 66.85. So they're within 2 floor rating points of each other. Let's look at the floor here. Floor in week 2, over 6 fantasy points. Ceiling in week 3 of over 27. He's less consistent than Chubb. Their average 3-week average is within a point of each other. So this is kind of a thing of pick 'em. Kareem Hunt's been more consistent. Let me look at totals here. No, excuse me. Chubb has been more consistent. Kareem Hunt has a higher total. Chubb has a higher floor. Hunt has a higher ceiling. They're back to back in the rankings, 10 and 11. But flip a coin. I just kind of have stayed away from that whole offense all year. Okay, that's going to wrap it up. That's our top 10 quarterbacks and running backs after week 3. Like, comment, subscribe. Click on the notification bell. Please do me a favor. Don't smash anything. Just click on it. I abhor violence. Head over to Patreon. Support the channel. You get more audio. You get more video. You get cool printable PDFs that are color-coded. I'm going to try to make a way that you can sort things over there by the columns. I know you can do that, but I'm brand new to this. I don't know how to do all this kind of stuff, but I'm learning, and I'm trying to get more streamlined and better at it as we go. So that's our top 10 running backs and quarterbacks for week 3. Thanks for watching and/or listening.